Do no wrong, have you seen? IWS accused of slamming a door into a teenage student's face. It didn't happen. The CCTV showed it didn't happen. The door had a fire safety feature, meaning it could not be slammed. The mum still claimed her precious son would never lie, so me. Cameras and physics must be wrong. Had a parent once refute video evidence of her child striking another child because that's not what her son said happened. I worked the school age room in a child care center. My youngest kiddo was 5 and 11-12 was supposed to be the max age in that room. The center director had a 14-year-old who was bored at home. So she would bring her in and have her help, but instead she ran a pack of mean girls who were constantly defying my instructions and picking on the younger kids. She'd go in and out of the room whenever she felt like it, and when I brought it up to the director as a problem, she said, "Are you saying that my child is the problem? I've told her that she should be helping you, and she tells me about how helpful she is and that she is constantly doing things for you. How can you complain about her?" Oh, no. She's not doing those things at all. Your 14-year-old is manipulating you. Like 14-year-olds do. Slightly different. But I once taught a child who was occasionally very disruptive. I had to ring the parents to tell them how this child had kicked, punched and then spat on a classmate after a football disagreement. The mum replied with, "I know he hits people and kicks people every now and again. That's just what he does. But my child would never spit at anyone. He's far too nice." I taught 6th grade at a private school. Since we're private, we have a specific testing week every spring to assess our students. I sent home an informative sheet describing the rigid schedule we have and when our tests will be administered. Doors have to remain closed and no disruptions were allowed. A little harsh. But it's what we were told to do by administration. If anyone was late, I assured them they can make the test up. But they would have to wait in the office. This kid asked to go to the bathroom. Obviously, as a teacher, I can't say no. I told him he had 5 minutes until the test and he will need to be quick. Needless to say, he was not back in time. So he was sent to the office until the testing time was finished. I received a LENGTHY email that began with, "What is your issue with my child? They never read my weekly newsletters and just believe whatever their child told them when they got home instead of asking the adult for their perspective. He's an only child with a single parent. He's everything to her. I get it. But was a real tough year." Not a teacher, but actually a student in high school. There was this kid who would bully people for exactly no reason and even went to the extent to make a kid commit suicide. The kid was really nice and also had lots of friends too. The kid who committed suicide. Just to clarify, he would even bully his family. But when the staff of the school eventually caught onto this, they called his mom and the principal talked to them in his office. I was an office aide, which means I just helped deliver papers and stuff, but I'm mostly stuck in the office where the principal's office is. His door was always open, literally. I saw the principal brought up camera records of the kid bullying people, and the mom went on to blame the principal of faking it and lying to her about her son when she clearly saw his face and transferred him to another school, and she tried to sue my principal for fraud. Not a teacher, but here's a retail story relevant to the topic. When I was in high school, I worked in an airsoft store. We had a brick and mortar shop and an online store that we shipped internationally from. It was a pretty regular occurrence that kids would steal their parents' credit cards, order something online from us, and have it shipped to them. Most of the time we'd just have them send everything back and we'd refund it. From time to time police got involved. One time, we had a 12-year-old kid who lived about 10 minutes from our store steal his mom's credit card and order about $1,200 worth of stuff from us. Mom found out and came storming into the store with her son and all the airsoft product he had ordered. She's furious, verbally assaulting me at the counter and basically saying it's the store's fault for making our website too easy for her son to order online. She was adamant that none of this is her son's fault and that we should have better fraud detection on our website. Made me so mad I told her maybe she should discipline her kid. She then wanted to speak to my boss, the owner, who told her the exact same thing. My mom worked in special ED for public schools and one of her students was basically a vegetable. The girl had been deprived of oxygen at birth for long enough that she's not even capable of forming sentences or walking on her own. Her parents insisted she was just misunderstood and actually gifted. This mom fought tooth and nail to get her daughter into the school's gifted program even though her daughter couldn't even count to 10. Quite sad really. Not a teacher, but I work at a school supply store and have asked this question a lot. My favorite one is about a teacher who taught 9th grade and a kid brought a pocket knife into my class and was showing it off. The resource officer, police officer in school, detained the child until his parents came, where they claimed that the teacher planted the knife on him to expel him to make the average GPA at the school higher. I was told the student had failing grades. Not a teacher, but definitely fits the my child can do no wrong part. There was a small town I used to live in and the mayor's son was a massive shit. One night, he got pulled over and arrested for drunk driving by the town cop. My son is an angel. Mayor promptly retaliated and within the month fired the cop for some bullshit reason. At a social event at someone's house, a toddler was chasing the host's cat and pulling her tail. The cat whopped her one. Cue screaming toddler. The mother, she was a true horror of a woman, scoops her up to comfort her. I figured the kid learned a life lesson not to hurt others or she might get hurt back. Nope. Mom tracked down the cat and held her down while telling the toddler to get the cat back by hitting her. I stared in horror as mom imparted her own life lesson to the child. Remember, if anyone ever hurts you, you hurt them back twice as bad. One of my child patients spit on my face once when I asked him what got him into trouble at school. His mother was right beside him and she said nothing until I glared at her for like 5 seconds. After which she pretended to scold the child. The worst was when I called a kid's parents because he was harassing several girls and exhibiting violent behavior towards other kids in class. Had a parent-teacher conference about it with all of his teachers and the dean of students present. And in the end his dad said, "I know he's doing this, but you have to understand. It isn't him. It's the devil taking over his body." I had a parent-teacher conference once where the parent told me that her child's bad behavior was my fault because I was too young to teach. I was 26 at the time. One kid stole another kid's shoe. Parents came in the next morning. I told them what happened. They denied he took anything. Opened his backpack. There was the shoe. They blamed me. Kid consistently came to class stoned. His jacket reeked of weed. I called the mom already and she told me that her kid promised that he did not use drugs. Fair enough. I'm not the police. If the mom doesn't care, then it goes way down on my priority list. He gets suspended a few times for having drugs on him. Mom hires lawyers and appeals every suspension. Because her kid was just holding drugs for friends. Some actually get overturned because the evidence is thin and administration doesn't want to deal with mom and lawyers. But some of them stick. Eventually, he is dumb enough to prompt a search of his locker where they find his impressively large stash. He gets suspended for that as well. Mom calls me to get the homework for the classes he is missing. And as we are chatting, she lets me know that her son got framed and, yes, has still never used drugs in his entire life. I didn't argue the point. Some causes are completely lost. One student I had, 12M, was really cruel to others. He'd throw slushies, plasticine, pencils, erasers, etc. to students that had invisible disabilities such as autism. His parents would scoff off his bullying as boys being boys. Once his sister, 14F, who was an honors student with a heart of gold, stole his phone and texted people pretending to be him. Their dad was so mad she wasn't allowed to go to her sports competition and he asked the school to continue his lecture from home on good behavior. I'd never seen more unequal expectations for the kids from the same family. The teacher put in charge of lecturing the sister handled it right. She asked the girl if her brother deserved it and then told her the next time she needed to get back at him. The teacher had plenty of ways that would be much harder to catch by the parents. Kid stole my damn phone. But the parents said we bought him that yesterday. Damn, I felt so good when I unlocked it and then glared at the parents. Edit. Forgot to say this, but I am not a teacher. Edit 2. This is funny how my most upvoted comment is this. Also forgot to mention that we had to use Find My iPhone to set it back. Very funny when we had to go to his house and take it back. Not a teacher. But I remember in 5th grade, I was best friends with a girl who never did any schoolwork. She had a ton of missing assignments. She was one of a few in my class who didn't do assignments. My teacher then decided that anyone with missing work wouldn't participate in field day. She gave us a week's notice for this. And then another one 2 days before. Then another one the day before field day. My friend then spent the whole night before field day working on missing work. She still didn't get it all done. And had to work while the rest of us were walking with our feet in buckets. She was so mad. Saying I worked all night and I still can't do field day. Blah blah blah. Her mom was spouting the same things. Saying her daughter shouldn't have to be excluded just because she didn't do schoolwork. I used to work at a private rich kids only high school and had a student, 3rd year, who would do everything in his power to disrupt the class. But sitting on top of his desk with his back turned to the board. Throwing bottle caps across the classroom. Shouting out the answer to so and so question on exams. Detention and suspension didn't exist at this school. I could only write up a warning which lead nowhere. It was basically a place where parents could buy their kids a high school diploma. Teachers were discouraged to call in students' parents as well. I guess so as not to bother them. They were paying customers after all. Despite this, I obviously had to have a talk with his mother to find a solution to his discipline problem. Her solution? You have to impress my son and earn his respect. Then he will stop acting out. I also had another student who would climb up on the locker section of the classroom, lockers were in students' homerooms, and lie down with his coat over his face cause he wanted to take a nap. Teachers were absolutely powerless to do anything at that school. I fled when my contract was over. One time, a kid clapped when I explained the origin of Denim Day, which is a day of advocacy for victims of sexual violence. This kid started clapping and smiling when I told my class that a woman in Italy was raped. He was kicked out and given a referral. His mom is a turbo bitch who keeps him saddled with a disabled designation so that she can control his life and feel power over teachers. She had the nerve to accuse me of retaliation against her son because he had a B+ in my class instead of an A. She also tried to peddle some crap about that's not why he was clapping, when I was there and she wasn't. The child was caught doing an inappropriate, expulsion-worthy act, on camera. Parents say it wasn't their kid in the video. In another case, I called home to tell a parent about a child's inappropriate words. The parent informed me they already heard from their kid and the kid told them another student did it so I should punish that kid instead. Lastly, kid plagiarized, 8th grade. Parents told me it was my fault because I didn't teach him about plagiarism. He still received credit for his essay. Administration was supportive of the parent point of view. And there are just so many more. Running onto a soccer field to scream at the referee about a call and getting banned from athletics for a year. That mother was a treat. Witnessed a mom get kicked out of a hockey arena when I was kid. It was my brother's team playing. I was there as a spectator. She threatened the lives of the referees and even some of the kids, like 12, maybe 13-year-old boys, on my brother's team because she didn't understand the rules of hockey, wasn't ready to see the reality of it. Her kid was embarrassed as hell and was apologizing to players refs during this incident, but you could tell this wasn't the first time it had happened. I'm not a teacher, but I did work with kids once at an indoor bouncy castle. Kids are required to wear socks to go on the castle. This particular kid isn't. So I kick him off, which I'm allowed to do. The mom gets up in my grill about how she accepts the risk of her kid not wearing socks. Yeah. That's not how it works. Me. Don't open this thread, it will just make you mad. Opens thread. Me. God damn it. Someone's kid wanted to stab my sister with a knife and the mom didn't do shit about it. My little sister and my stepmom. It was about 2 years ago that I was in the other room doing homework, and my little sister, who was 10-12 at the time, wanted a new phone. My stepmom said they couldn't afford it at the moment and my little sister screamed bitch and slapped the hell out of my stepmom. literally leaving marks. The argument continued and my little sister opened the junk drawer and took about 50 to 70 pencils and threw them all on the ground and went upstairs into her room. My stepmom went up there to apologize and about 20 minutes later started picking up all the pencils. I asked her why isn't she making my sister do it? And her actual excuse was that she has a bad headache for screaming so much and my stepmom picked them all up. The next morning my dad went into work late to buy her a new phone and put it on his credit card. I got grounded once for telling my friends that my step was my stepmom. Let alone my sister calling her a bitch and slapping her multiple times. If you have kids in school, just remember, they may tell you a version of what happens where they are the unwitting victim of circumstances beyond your control. The critical part of parenting here is what you do with that. If you believe their incredible story and get mad, they learn not just how to trigger you, but that you can be triggered to their defense. If you fact find and get a more reasonable sounding story, punish your kid for trying to fuck with you. I've had a student I witnessed firsthand telling her mom events that absolutely did not happen just to trigger her. Raise your kids to know it's safe to tell you the truth or they will learn to lie. We have this kind of meeting every year with his teachers. We know, son's name, can't do multiplication. He was a freshman in high school in pre-algebra. How he passed 3rd 8th grade is beyond me, besides teachers just passing him to get rid of him. These people had money. They had resources. They could have gotten him tutoring years ago to help him. Instead they preferred we just pass him and excuse his acting out because he refused and couldn't do the work because he didn't have the basic foundation. He couldn't do multiplication so he couldn't do division. And it all spiraled from there. They were so calm about it. Like, what's the problem with that? So what? I was floored. Not a teacher, but I work on a college campus. Had a student that was arrested by campus police for committing a home invasion. The student kicked the door in, pointed a Glock at the occupant's face, point blank, and waited for his buddy to gather the occupant's PS4, controllers and games. They then left. Turns out, the gunman learned that the occupant egged his car a couple days before and this was his vengeance. Gunman's mother freaked out because her 19-year-old child had been arrested and held the belief that if her son's car had never been egged, he wouldn't have had to do that because her son was taught to command respect and was justified because he had been disrespected. Son got 3 years. Lost his football scholarship and a decent chance to better his life. All very sad. I taught at a school in a mega affluent community. Colossally wealthy families that lived in castles. Very powerful and influential people. Most of the kids were lovely, but there were plenty of shits. And some were just downright unbelievable. It wasn't the kids' fault. Mind you, they were just spoiled to the point of being devoid of common sense and reality. One particular boy, who we'll call Francis, had basically given up on school. He knew he was set for life and put zero effort into anything. At one point, his grades were so poor that his parents, completely aloof and dependent upon Francis' team of au pairs, Francis called his parents by their first names. Mind you, proposed buying passing grades so that Francis could move on to the next grade. The principal told me that during their meeting, Dad pulled out the checkbook and asked for an amount. Lots of Francis stories. I also had a student in kindergarten who regularly punched other students, ran around the room, and refused to do work. His mother called for a conference, and the first thing she said was that his behavior was my fault. She had him switched out of my class. Thank God. Once I had a piano student whose mother made him take lessons, even though his heart wasn't in it. For several weeks, he'd come back with exactly the same mistakes as the week before and with no sign of improvement. I made it comfortable for him to describe weekly practice and his thoughts about taking piano lessons. He said that he had no interest in the piano or any other instrument and that he pretended to practice to get his mother off his back. I told his mom that forcing him to take lessons was a mistake, that his heart wasn't in it and that it might turn him against music forever to persist. He said, he's a gifted student and he'd never waste practice time. I simply said that I have his best interests in mind and that he needs to pursue something he's genuinely interested in, and not be coerced into studying as a result of parental pressure. The boy gave me an appreciative hug. But his mom looked daggers at me as they walked away. Pre-K student brought in a knife from home. Chased around another student with it. Then punched him in the face, which resulted in a very bloody and bruised nose. This all happened within seconds during recess. When I contacted the parents of the knife child, they said, and I'm not even kidding, "What did you do to make my son bring in a knife to school and punch another kid in the face?" Then they threatened to call the superintendent to get my teaching license revoked for wrongly accusing their child of hurting another student. Yep. Good old parents. If you want to get nothing in return, you can like and join my Discord. There is a link in the description.